Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to the Scream Scene. I'm Jody Dean. Today, I have an awesome guest here with me. I've been eyeballing this guy for a while. I've known about him for a long time. I remember seeing him back in the day playing the Viper on Full House. I got David Lipper with me, ladies and gentlemen. David, what's going on, bud?
What's up, man? Good to be here.
Man, thanks for coming on. We had a little time difference today, but David worked with me, man. So he just proved how cool of a guy he actually is. But
Huh.
man, listen, for anybody that doesn't know, this guy's an actor, he's a producer, director. He's been in a lot of stuff, TV shows, movies. But he's done some writing, some directing. For anybody that doesn't know, I know you're born and raised in Canada, I believe, but tell people,
Yep.
man, a little bit about where you're from and what got you into doing TV and movies and all this stuff.
So I grew up in Montreal, Canada, like you were saying. I think I knew from the time I was just a child that this was the space for me. I think at the age of 8, my parents just wanted me out of the house. Back then, I used to sing a lot, so I started doing musical theater. Um, I'm Jewish, but I joined a church choir and did the gondoliers. Then I ended up doing a synagogue play. Whatever I could get my hands on, it didn't really matter. And kept booking the leads, good reviews from really early on. So it wasn't like it was out of nowhere. It just kind of always was. This was the spot for me. This was where I was best. Again, it was more musical theater in the early days, and I ended up at a place called Stage Door Manor, which was a musical theater camp, a full theater camp, like they did straight theater and musicals, but the musical theater was the real big program there. A lot of kids who'd been on Broadway trained there, and I wasn't sure if that's where I was ultimately going to end up, but that's where I ended up focusing on when I went to Emerson College. I got a degree in musical theater, a BFA, and I also played at varsity hockey. So go figure that one. But I think it's more a general view of me, which is I don't really put myself in a box and think I'm this or that. And the fact that I played varsity hockey and was a musical theater guy, which really did not mix at all. The people in those two areas did not mix, but I did, and that's kind of carried all the way through for what you were talking about, all the different hats I've worn. So, I grew up in the son of a businessman who built 2 factories from the ground up in the Caribbean. So I learned a lot about business from him, and it was a natural progression, I guess, that ultimately and eventually I would add producing to my cap. But acting really has been my living for most of my life. Um, I moved to Los Angeles as soon as I graduated from Emerson. By 1993, Kaufman Bright Crane had given me my own show. It was called Reality Check. Funny enough, their other pilot that year was Friends. My co-stars on Reality Check, which funny enough is on YouTube. So you could just punch in Reality Check David Lipper and you'll find it. Um, my co-stars on that, and this will be a trip for a lot of people, were a very, very young Kaylee Coco, who played my little sister, Giovanni Ribisi, who played my best friend, Hilary Swank, who played my other best friend, Tiffany Thiessen played my girlfriend. I mean, it was just everybody from this pilot, massive, including the writer producers with the biggest show on television, Friends. So it was just really weird that all of a sudden some guy at Fox decided to pull us at the last second when they got the rights to football, because we were going to be on Sunday nights between The Simpsons and Married with Children, and just like that, they pulled it the last second and said we're going to take a sports show,
Wow,
and
ain't that
that's kind of
something?
the world of television. Yeah, it's crazy. So that got me at least a lot of recognition, that I had booked that job. Warner Brothers was very hot on me. Les Moonves at the time, who was the president of Warner Brothers Television, and then they put me on Full House. and that brought me to 1994. And 94, 95 were my years on Full House. And unfortunately, it was season 8, and that was the last season. And then I went on to do a lot of other shows that unfortunately didn't last very long, like the Martin Short Show. I think we only lasted 3 episodes. And a bunch of other failed pilots. Back in those days, they made a lot of pilots, so a lot of them did not get picked up. And then I got into this rut of Lifetime movies. Like at first, it was NBC and CBS, and they were big, much bigger films when they were the major network films. I think
Hmm.
NBC had 3 movie nights at one point. So it really shifted the business because, from these big network movies that they spent a few $1 million on and we were really well paid on, all of a sudden became Lifetime movies. Really, the Lifetime movie network and Lifetime were the real go-tos for TV movies once the network stopped doing them, the big four, and the money went down and down and down and down and down. If the budget was like 3 million, and I'm going back in like the 90s or
Hmm.
early 2000s when the budgets were 3 million, now they're like 1.5, and you're like, so inflation has gone like this, and the
And
license fees for these things have gone into the toilet. So that's,
right.
by the way, a recurring theme of what's happening in our business right now, which is making the economics uh, really difficult. And as a producer, I'm keenly aware of that. But that's kind of the progression of what happened in my acting career. And I think somewhere around 2016,
Hmm.
I realized it's just getting worse, right? Like I had starred in this movie called Black Widower for Lifetime with Kelly McGillis, who at that time still looked pretty decent. She's had a rough time lately, but you know, that was a big Lifetime movie. I was the star of the film, and I think I got paid 25 grand for it. And
Wow.
that was a wake up call for me where I just went, this is not sustainable. Like, even if I do 2 of these a year, I can't make a living on that. Don't forget, that's the gross number. You got to take off your commissions for your manager, your agent, your
Right.
lawyer, your business manager.
You're not
You
walking
know,
away with 25 G's in the pocket from the whole
no,
thing.
you're
Yeah.
lucky if you get half that. And
Yeah.
so, who's living off that? I'm certainly not, and I, was awarded a certain way of living for when I was making 150 for the same movie.
Right.
Back when they were network movies. And so, the idea that we were once paid 150, inflation's gone up, and now we're getting 25 for the same
It's
movie.
crazy.
That just gives you an idea of how difficult it's become. But look, the stars, it's usually the female stars on the Lifetime formula, who are making, they'll probably still make 150 or maybe more if they're like big Lifetime contract stars. But for me as a guy getting older, I could see that. And so one of the things I did is I started teaching back in, like, I want to say 2010, maybe even earlier, maybe like 2005. I started teaching for Ivana Chubbuck, who's coached a lot of Oscar wins, and I got a lot of enjoyment out of that. And through that process, when I workshopped scenes in class, I remember I workshopped for these writers.
Hmm.
They're all saying to me, "Why aren't you directing? You're so good with the actors." And it was something I'd never really thought of. Funny enough, it's like, let some people say, I always wanted to be a director. I always wanted to be a writer. Um, Writing and directing. Hey, Daisy.
She wants to be.
Sorry,
She wants to be in the interview
she
too. It's
she
it's
she wants
okay.
she wants to be here.
We got
Um,
another star in the house.
yeah, but writing and directing really just kind of happened naturally as a further extension of creativity. And
Mhm.
so in 2016, I did a movie called The Unwilling with a friend of mine, Jonathan Heath,
I love
who's a
that movie.
director who. Oh, thanks, man. He had been nominated for an Oscar for a short film a long time ago, and had a career that looked like it was going to fly, and then some stuff happened, like it does. And so we said, hey, let's write a script together. Um, and we just kind of came up with, first off, what's something we could shoot for cheap. and make it ourselves. He was going to direct it. I was going to star in it, which we did. And we just wrote this movie called The Unwilling. I called my friend Dina Meyer, who I had worked with on a movie called Federal Protection years ago. And I said, I need a favor. She came in. She was awesome, did me a solid. We called in a really good casting director who helped find us some talent. And otherwise, Lance Henriksen, was somebody I'd always wanted to work with. I said, why not? Let's just call him and see if he wants to do it. And he did. And we made this little movie for, I think, like $350,000. It's got 6 million downloads already on a YouTube channel, not to mention everywhere else it's got. So that did, decently. I made a lot of mistakes as a producer, but I learned how to produce a movie.
Right.
And then from there, it just grew, right? So a buddy of mine, Ivo Raza, who had directed me in a short, that was really, really good, by the way. I think it was called like 15 Hours in Bed or something, or something like that. He said, I have a movie for you to star in. If you want to help produce it, great. Otherwise, I got a producer. But let's do this movie. And I looked at it and I said, I can put this together for you, no problem, here in LA, and I can pull talent and all that. And we did, and we shot that for also an ultra low budget. People like Ja Rule did cameos, Ed Begley Jr., David Koechner, and then all these reality stars, like Corinne Olympios and Johnny Bananas. And
Mhm.
so we had a lot of names that popped in to study with the guru. I play a fake guru, who we're shooting. It's a mockumentary, so my brother's shooting this documentary to expose how easily people are duped. And then, of course, like all of these people, I start to believe my own BS and think that I can change people and heal them. And it just into this Frankenstein. Um, so that was a lot of fun, and that brought us to 2019. And so again, by 2020, I had been thinking, maybe I should direct, and I directed Deathlink in March of 2020. And of course, the pandemic decided to break out in the middle of my shoot and
Of
lockdown.
course.
So I cut my schedule from 16 days to 11, and I scrambled to figure out how to do this. I lost my whole stunt team, so I started
Wow.
choreographing stunts with my DIT guy who who stunt doubled for me. It was actually a very good stunt guy. Now him and his brother company, but that really, I think, was a start from him on that, moving into that position. The two brothers, Greg and Jeff, um, and yeah, so we just got it done. And I was like, oh my God, I can shoot in a pandemic. So let's do it again. And then we shot Just Swipe with Jodie Sweetin. That was, again, I got approached by Elizabeth Blake Thomas, who had been my first AD on Deathlink. And she said, I'm directing this thing and I need help and somebody to produce it and star in it. And I need you to star in it and you to produce it. And I said, okay. And we shot that for 8 days in a house during lockdown,
Hmm.
pre-vaccine, and that was very difficult. 8 days is a very difficult amount of time to shoot a movie, but we were too
Yeah.
scared about people getting sick, not to mention the budget was anemic. So um, I said, look, if we can contain it to this one house and we can do 2 days on, 1 day off, 6 days, I can shoot this in 8 out of 9 days. And the chances of somebody testing positive will be much less. Than the longer we go, the greater the chance of somebody tests positive and we have to shut down. And that's how we
Wow.
had to think in those days. And so we got it done. I was talking like I'm talking to you.
Hmm.
The premise of the movie is Jodie and I find each other on a dating app, and it's two people that normally wouldn't be hooking up, but because we're forced to communicate like this without just jumping into bed, we end up getting to know each other and striking up a friendship and having true love. And kind of a social commentary of, we're so used to like quick gratification these days. We
Hmm.
forgot there's a courting process, there's a getting to know each other process, there's become friends first and then get into a lasting relationship. So it's really almost a classic romantic comedy in that sense. framed with a very real chaotic time in our lives. And what's crazy is as the pandemic is happening, as lockdown is happening, we're shooting this movie in real time about two people that find each other in lockdown. And
Right.
there's a lot of funny stuff, like when the delivery guy comes to the door with like a mask and a shield and the gloves, and how insanely fearful we all were of contact with anybody, and how we sanitized boxes and before we'd open them, and it was just like all that comes into play in this movie. But as an actor, never mind the producer on this, I shot all my coverage of me talking to the camera like I'm talking to you, the way I was talking to her on
Hmm.
FaceTime or Zoom or whatever it would have been. I shot it all in one day, 55 pages. So I can't
Wow.
even tell you, I don't know. I probably could count on two fingers how many actors I know can do that. But that's the thing, when I'm producing or directing or I have the control to put me in a film, I'm going to put me in because I know I'm going to save us time, because that's one of my skills. I can knock out 55. I mean, I didn't even know I could knock out 55 pages, but I guess I could. And if you've done a play, well, you do it every night. Of course, you have lots of rehearsal time to really get those lines down. But yeah, I knocked out 55 pages in a day of all my coverage talking to Jodie. Every
Wow.
single scene where I'm talking to her over the phone or the computer, like I'm talking to you right now, was done in one day.
And
The
you're
whole
talking to
movie.
another Jody right now, so go figure.
That's right.
Um, one thing that's crazy to me is how people were so productive during the COVID thing. Like, is it was almost like it was a gift and a curse. But for people in the production side of it, it was like, man, it's a lot quieter out here in some areas now, to where sound's always such an issue when we're doing films. But some people said that, it was like the best thing that ever happened to them. But working actors were like, this was just the worst thing that could have happened to us, because nobody had time to prepare. It's like the whole lockdown thing just happened. I was getting ready to sign a lease for a 3-year lease for a store I was opening, and like within 2 days they shut down the state, and I was like, wow, thank God I did not sign that lease. But that's how people didn't have a lot of time, man. So you had to get super productive. And then you're talking about how, inflation went up, especially around that times when it started, right? Slowly right then. But not only did inflation go up, but these other aspects, they're not paying as well, and then everything shut down. It's like you had to be super creative in that pocket, right?
100%. You had to start, certain people are out of the box thinkers and are problem solvers and don't think about woe is me and just think about what do I have to do next. And I'm just one of those people, right? So when the pandemic hit in the middle of Deathlink, I didn't just shut down and say, forget it. I can't work like this. Like, I can't make this work in 11 days. I just said, how do I make it work in 11 days?
Mhm.
And it was crazy. Me and the first AD and the whole AD department were in my house, and I had like piles. Scene one, scene two, scene three, scene four, scene five. I had everything in scenes, and then locations. This house, that house, the ranch. And I'm like, okay, how do I take 2 weeks and put it into these three locations? That's all I had left that I could shoot in one more week. And then how do I pile them on here and put it in this room and shift this room to this house? And that's what I did, and I figured it out. And that's what you have to do in the movie business. Yeah, there's too many things that happen in real time, especially with COVID. This time, just because the vaccine came out didn't change the fact that people got sick, and we had to. As soon as somebody got COVID, right? What changed is we didn't have to shut down anymore. Once the vaccine came out, they changed the rules from having to shut down to just removing that person and continuing to test every day. So by the time I did Curse of Wolf Mountain, that was February of 2021. We still didn't, the vaccine was just starting for like healthcare workers. And I got an early shot, luckily because of my situation. But um, we again shot in 8 days because we were too scared about people getting sick and having to shut the production down. And that was 2 days at my house and 6 days on a mountain, a 200-acre ranch.
And
And
that
that
was
was
a
exact.
great film. I just want to say real quick, man,
Thank you.
I like that film, but now that you've told me that, it's a whole new level of respect, especially knowing production. Jesus, man, that is incredible.
And I killed 10 people in this movie, and I did it in 8 days. And that is, there's one thing to shoot in a rom-com where I can
Hmm.
knock 55 pages off in a day talking to a camera. It's
Right.
a whole other thing where I'm doing stunts and blood and all of that practical stuff in camera before we even get to the VFX, and shooting in 8 days. That was obscenely overambitious. And if you didn't have me at the helm who knew everything and how to keep pushing and like grab the camera, let's shoot this, now shoot this, now shoot this. By the way, we also shot day for night, which is a whole other technical disaster because it's counterintuitive. You have to keep getting away from the sun, right? Because you can't have a bright light in the background because the background needs to be dark and you're lighting just the images in front of you. That's how we light at night, right? You light what
Hmm.
we're seeing and everything else is black. So to recreate that in day for night without the because we didn't have the time or the money for the lights to set up night shoots. So we shot during the day and we had to keep avoiding night. It was really, really weird. And it gave this really weird glow, which I thought would work for the film over the full moon, um, eerie Wolf Mountain, where this wolf man is running around. So what I did was I made sure everything that wasn't on the mountain, I did night for night. So like when we were at the ranger station, at night, it was lit for night and it was an actual night. When we were at my house, that was night for night and we actually lit night. But everything on that mountain was day for night. And I
Dang.
kind of creatively explain that as it's unnatural, this
Hmm.
mountain, but everywhere else is the real world. And my hope was to get away with that, and that's where again that out of the box thinking comes. Where I have this fight with directors when I'm producing, where I'm just like, you have it in your head in one way, but I'm telling you, we only have this much for this day, so let's creatively come up with a shot that works around that. And I find I'm much more creative when I'm put in a box and here are the borders, here are the margins, here's all I can give you, then come up with an idea. And so this was actually a good creative idea to give it one look for the mountain and another look for everywhere else. But I was forced into that idea by saying you have no lights.
Hmm.
And so no time to light and no ability to do night shoots. And so that within itself gave up that creative. I have a movie coming out August 3rd called Murder at Hollow Creek. It stars Mickey Rourke and Jason Patrick and a whole host of amazing actors, Penelope Ann Miller, Perry Reeves, not to mention Casper Van Dien comes back for me,
And
and a
I
whole bunch
think
of other.
that's your
Yeah,
second time working with Rourke too, isn't it?
that is. We worked together on Hunt Club, and I actually directed all his scenes in Hunt
Another
Club.
great film.
Thank you very much. But I want to tell you about this movie. You're going to see there's a shot, and no one's seen the movie yet, but when you see this and it comes out in August, I had 10 minutes to shoot a scene.
Hmm.
Um, Ouch, 7 people. And so what I did was I started on a joint, and the guy lights the joint, and he's got the first line, and he passes it to the girl who's got the next line. And I kind of set them up where their lines were to be in that order. And I just put the steady cam on, and I followed the joint like this, and as we're revealing the next person talking, it didn't always exactly land on the person when they were talking, which is even better, until it finally got to the last person talking. And people who saw an advanced screening of that at the Beverly Hills Film Festival said it was their favorite shot in the movie. And again, I think it's a super cool shot, and you always want to try one of these oneers that are super cool. That you have a device that's walking you through the scene like
Hmm.
that. It works really, really well. But the only reason I did that is because I had 10 minutes to shoot the scene. So it forced me to think creatively as a director. So again, if I'm not forced into that, I'm probably shooting all kinds of coverage and your standard,
Right.
let's dolly in over here, and then let's shoot a two-shot here, and then let's cover this and an over the shoulder. And you don't want to do that for a whole movie. You want to mix it up and come in with an interesting shot like this. And people walked out of that movie saying that was my favorite shot in the movie.
Wow. Isn't that awesome, man? I
Yeah.
I love that. I love how filmmakers work under pressure better, and that's where the best ideas come from. I always like brag about like the indie people, like, you know, there comes a point to where when there's so much money, everything's so easy, but when you don't have a lot, your creativeness is just, you have to figure out how to get the most value out of nothing, and that's when you really find it, it seems.
100%, and it's like, it makes me nuts where, now, like I said, I've really blown up as a producer. At the end of 21, I formed a company called Latigo Films with my partner, Robert A. Daly Jr. If the name sounds familiar, that's because his father, Robert A. Daly Sr., was the chairman and CEO of Warner Brothers for 20 years, from 1980 to 2000, and also former Dodger owner. Bobby saw what I was doing, with all these little movies and shooting all through COVID. And every single one of them, no matter how difficult, I came in on time, on budget. And he said, I want to partner with you. I think we can do some real good stuff. You just need a bigger backer. You need more money. You need more access. And Bobby gave me that in spades. Really has been a saint of a partner. He called his buddy at CAA and said, let's go in there and get representation, and we did, and we signed with the biggest agency in the world. And we've exponentially grown in a very, very short amount of time. I mean, really, from the beginning of 22 until now, early 24, we've gone from budgets of 200,000 to 32 million. And, now we're getting ready to do a Liam Neeson movie. That's a big action film. We have a big film called Brideheart, Wilson, that Perfect World may be out as early as Christmas, if not early next year. We're extremely excited about that action comedy. It also has Divine Joy, who won the Oscar. But yeah, coming out right now in August, we have two big releases. So one, the movie I directed, Murder at Hollow Creek, with Mickey Rourke, Jason Patric, and then some great kids, by the way, like Jack Kessie, who's the new Hellboy.
Oh, okay.
So Jack is one of the leads in Murder at Hollow Creek, and he's amazing in this film. Also, Jessica Lord, absolutely beautiful Australian actress who's been in a relationship with Matt Rife for the last year. Matt Rife has got a cameo in it. He's in 5
Nice.
of my movies. It's funny. I just kept saying, this kid's going to be a star. This kid's going to be a star. This kid's going to be a star. And no one was listening to me. And I said, well, screw all of you. I'm going to keep putting him in every single movie until he breaks, because it's coming. And lo and behold, as much as I believe in my ability to recognize these things, I could not in my wildest dreams have predicted that he would sell out 6 nights in a row at Radio City in New York.
Massive,
And
massive. Yeah.
he is now the biggest comic in the world. Like,
Right.
it's crazy. Like, he just, one viral TikTok video or whatever it was, and boom, he's now the guy. And he's really been quite clever at understanding social media and how to use it as a comic. I think he's the first comic that fully exploited that, because he's young enough,
Hmm.
and cool enough, and already part of the influencer world. He already had a few 100,000 followers, even when we were doing Deathlink, and I put him in that movie, which was the first one of 5. He's also in our film Karma, which came out in May. So we've made a lot of movies. Latigo has made 15 movies in 2.5 years,
That's
and
incredible.
it's pretty crazy. As myself, as an actor, I've been in 60 movies, but as a producer, I'm catching up now. I've done 35. So, you
I
know,
noticed that.
uh,
I was
it's
looking at the resume and I said, man, this guy has been in a ton of movies. But that's why I was going to ask you, like, after doing so much in acting and with the writing and directing, um, I mean, is there one that you favor now at this point?
it's a really good question, because at the end of the day, I think the craft that I've worked the most on, that I've not only done my 10,000 hours, but well past that, is acting. And I really do believe that's what I'm best at. But ironically, because I speak finance and business and grew up in a house like that, I possess a really unique quality as a producer, because we have, what you'll notice in film, we have several producers on films. And the reason is that because we typically have the finance people on the
Hmm.
producing side who make the financing work. And then we have the creative producers who find good material, attach good talent, have those relationships. And it's rare that producers speak both languages and they really just rely on the finance producers to guide that section while they focus on the other. I happen to speak both sides. Um, and um, and so because I come from the creative world, obviously I've written three that have been made, I've directed three that have been made, and I've acted in 60, not to mention 200 episodes of television. Um, I am a creative, but I'm pretty good with the finance plans. So with all
Right.
that, it's put me in this weird position now where I'm running a company that I have to be really focused on the business side and the numbers and the finance. And the finance side has kind of taken over the last 2 years of my life. And it's been very, very strange. I got to be honest. Like I just, it's been a massive shift. I mean, it's fun and exciting, and it's a new thing that a new skill I developed that I learned I'm pretty good at. But you know, I miss doing as much of the creative side as I used to. So I'm trying to find that balance where I direct, one a year, and I act in at least one or two a year. And I try and write one every few years kind of thing. But there's only so many hours in a day, and I don't go out and party, and I don't have a girlfriend or kids, or, I don't have any distractions. So I could do a lot more than the average person in a day, but there's still a limit to how much I can do as one person. So I'm trying, not to fully burn myself out. And I have a lot of energy, which is good. I'm in good health, which
Yes,
is
it is.
good. So I can handle a lot. But having said that, I'm trying to balance all this, and it's tough, because my responsibility right now is to the bottom line of my company, and I have to make sure that the partner who's shown trust and belief in me gets paid off, and I need to make money for him. And that's my prime directive. Everything else falls after that, but I do want to look after myself too. And I haven't really been thinking about that lately. And so that's a shift that'll be coming.
Well, I was gonna ask you. I mean, I think you kind of just answered it, but I wonder if there's something underlining that you didn't mention there. Are obviously you don't have a lot of time, but is there any hobby you've had throughout your life, or is there anything you collect? Is there anything that like people don't know about Lipper? Like, man, he's really into action figures or posters or playing on the piano whenever we're not watching him on, a part of these things. Because that's something I'm curious about, man. Because obviously I've seen a lot of your material and I'm like, I wonder what he does, when he's not doing this. There's got to be something.
Well, the funny thing is, I guess I'm one of those guys who made my hobbies a career. Um,
Right.
so, I mean, yeah, I play the guitar, I play piano. I got to do that on Full House. I got to play and sing. That part of my life, unfortunately, is really faded.
Mm,
Aside from the odd karaoke night, I don't really sing anymore. And it's weird because, all the way through the 90s, that was a very big part of my life. And one of the great joys of being on Full House was I got to be in a band. And it was a really good band. I got to
mhm.
tell you, like, these guys were some of the best musicians I've ever played with. You had the bass player Chuck, who played with Quiet Riot, Ted on keyboards, had toured with Guns N' Roses. Stamos tours with the Beach Boys and is a really solid drummer. So we had a good little band. And I remember telling Stamos, like, why aren't we touring and stuff? He's like, no, I'm touring with the Beach Boys. So I was like, all right. But I kind of wish that band had come and done some gigs and stuff. The Monkey Puppets. Maybe it's time to bring back the Monkey Puppets.
Ooh,
I
man,
would
that's
I
the
would
title
love
of this video.
I would love to do that, man. But yeah, so I do miss the music. That's, I guess, now become a hobby that
Mm,
I don't scratch that itch much anymore. It used to be a major part of my life. I mean, that's why I was a musical theater major, because I didn't want to do one or the other. I wanted to do both. And, for whatever reason, acting took off much more so than music. And, really the last time to do both was Full House, and that's 1994, 95. Although they bring me back for Fuller House, not so long ago when that show got rebooted on Netflix, which was a lot of fun, by the way. I got to do a couple of episodes on the reboot. But yeah, it's so there's that, and I guess I still play hockey 3 times a week in LA. So that's one of my major hobbies. You can't take the hockey
Well,
out of the
that's
Canadian.
huge, man. 3 times a
Yeah,
week to be able to get out there and still play hockey. Well, that yeah, so there's that right there.
yeah,
It,
that's a major part of my life. And I don't go to the gym, so that's it. Like I go to hockey and staying in pretty good shape. I got to tell you, it's pretty good exercise. And or when I'm on location, which is a lot, where because we rarely seem to shoot in LA anymore. Then I'm working out in the gym when I'm there.
do
Yeah,
you
those are my hobbies.
do you love obviously I think for any filmmaker I wanted to so in my 20s I wanted to start producing horror and so that's what I did but I noticed a lot of people that want to get into making films, they tend to go into the horror genre because it seems like it's the easiest one to get into. There's a lot you can do that's impactful with very little. And now you've seen the game change, film cameras, people still do shoot in film, but I mean, you can do so much now with very inexpensive cameras since the budgets and the pay and all this stuff has changed along the way. Have you seen that horror is just the best kind of films to produce in the era that we're in right now and most economical?
I mean, look, if you take even my own thinking on The Unwilling, that's where we said, how do we shoot a movie for low budget? What's a good idea? And we, of course, gravitated towards horror. That is the easiest, lowest barrier to entry as a filmmaker. So when you have very little funds and you don't care about huge stars and you want to be able to get away with it, horror is the one genre you can really get away with all that and get lucky. The problem is
Mhm,
exactly what we just talked about, which is anybody can do it. And so what's happened is the market's been absolutely flooded with these low
mhm,
budget horror movies. And it's very hard for people to find your movie in this massive ocean of low budget horror films. And that's where, we always want to add some kind of name value. That's why in Curse of Wolf Mountain, I have both Danny Trejo and Tobin Bell from all the Saw movies. And, at least we have two iconic horror guys. I mean, Danny Trejo's gotten in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most killed man in the history of film.
love
And
it.
surprise, he's just spoiler alert, he gets killed. But that's what we try to do to differentiate. And it's really, really tough because, like I said, it's just too flooded. Like any other economic principle, it's supply and
Mhm,
demand. And there's just an abundance of supply in
yeah.
low budget horror movies. So on the one hand, yes, it's easy to get into if you're trying to make a movie because it's low barrier to entry. And then that is also the negative because it's a low barrier to entry. You have too much supply and not enough demand. So you're just praying somebody finds you on one of these platforms in a sea of horror films. It's really the bigger films that are much easier, strangely enough. As I've gotten, more experience as a producer, I've just been shying away from the lower budget stuff. Even though it sounds counterintuitive, you figure spend less, make more money. It's really not like that anymore because there's just so much of it. It's too easy to make the low budget stuff that we're much more secluded
Mhm.
on the high end stuff. The $30 million movies are difficult to put together. They take a lot, and because of that, it's a high barrier to entry. So there's not a lot of supply. So they're still buying those films much better than they're buying the lower budget stuff.
And where do you find the most profitable to be in that space? Is it the stuff that's going to theaters only?
Yeah. Well, it's not only, but it starts going to theaters and a proper release. So you want to have a movie that goes at least 1,500 screens and at least, let's say, 2.5 million in P&A spend. That's your advertising marketing spend. I preferably would like to be at 2,000 screens and 10 million P&A. Like that's really
Mhm.
where I want to live, where we have a real theatrical release and where that transfers over in our business is what they call PVOD, which is the premium VOD. That's when somebody, let's say you're at home with your family and you're like, okay, I can either take them all to the movies, which we've learned is getting expensive, having a hard time doing that, or I can make them feel like I've brought them to the movies in a movie that's at the movie theater, but I will rent it for $19.99 and I'll be a hero because they're watching the hot new film and I don't have to dish out for $150 in tickets and popcorn. And that is still working. So, but if we're on 2,000 screens and we're spending all this money on P&A, and we have a studio like a Lionsgate or somebody who's releasing it on all
Mhm.
these screens, then when you see it pop up on your VOD, you're going, okay, that's a major release. Kids, let's watch this. Or honey, let's watch this. And I'll dish out the money because it's still a hell of a lot cheaper to dish out $19 than $20 a ticket times however many tickets I'm buying at the theater, plus the popcorn and the drinks and everything versus, 10% of the cost to do it in the microwave.
Right.
And that's really where it's working. So the math is working on the 20 to $30 million movies. It's getting much, much harder on the smaller movies.
Wow. Well, that's great stuff, man. Because I want to cater to the filmmakers that watch this, the horror fans, and then just the fans of our actors and make this all possible to begin with. But I've done this a lot, where you pay 20-25 to watch a movie at home. It just makes more sense. And honestly, it's become so convenient, and it does seem like something that's very beneficial to people spending that quality time at home with their family. So theaters, that pocket there, DVD sales, are you still seeing that's do you anticipate the physical media going away anytime in the very near future?
I mean, DVD is done. It, we had this discussion on Hunt Club, which came out last May of last year or April of last year. And Walmart had done an major buy on the hard DVDs. And we said, okay, if we're going to get that kind of real estate in the store, let's go for it. They're saying they're still doing DVD sales. We lost a lot of money on that because we printed a lot of DVDs. And this is the part of the business that we normally don't do. And I had to be convinced to do it because I already know that this is risky and it did not pay off. So I'm just telling you that from experience, even just last year on a title that was well positioned with big stars for something like this. We had Mickey Rourke, Casper Van Dien, and Mina Suvari in the lead. And look, that movie's out now for everybody on the platforms, but the DVD and the platforms are going great, but the DVD sales did not go great. Um,
Mm.
and um, and I think it's just we're at that point now. I don't even know who has a DVD player, right? So it's like obviously there are people who do and still buy and rent them, but look, Redbox is done, and Redbox was a major revenue source for films. You could do 200,000-300,000 on Redbox for any one of these titles I just mentioned. That's just revenue that's gone. When your budget's only a million or 1.5 million and you're in that range, $300,000 is a lot of money.
Mhm.
And so that's gone. The DVD sales and the DVD rentals outside of even Redbox, that was a major number. You'd get a few $100,000. That's gone. So all of a sudden, you had two giant revenue sources that are gone. That could have been another $500,000-600,000 for your $1 million movie, and you're left with who's going to rent it on VOD, and then is a Amazon or Netflix or Hulu gonna take an exclusive window for a few years and pay you that fee? And they have basically been saying, no, we're not paying for those movies anymore. We're only going to buy the bigger movies. Or you can package them in a second run for like $10,000-20,000, which isn't going to do much for you. So really these movies have been living on AVOD, which is the advertising VOD. That's your Tubi, that's your YouTube, anything that has ad revenue that you're sharing.
Right.
And those have been doing better and better. That market is the one place we've seen growth. It's, I guess, really the new TV, right? It's like TV seems to be going bye-bye, and streamers with commercials is going like this.
Mhm.
So, So that's one market that's working, but it's working when you spend 50 to $100,000 on making your movie. It's not working so much when you're spending 1 to 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. And
Right.
that 1 to 5 million, which unfortunately is where we had been living for the last couple of years, that market's really, really hurting. Again, that's why we have a lot of big movies coming out now.
Mhm.
Um, Brideheart, like I said, is big. Not Without Hope. We hope to have a premiere in Toronto. That's with Zachary Levi and Josh Duhamel and Joe Carnahan wrote and directed it. Thank you.
Bless you.
Excuse me. We have, huge high hopes for that one. That's a $20 million movie. So all these budgets, in that range, like I said, in the anywhere I'd say between 15 and 30, I think is really a good place right now. That's the new low budget that works. And look, the studios are still spending, at their lowest 35 and highest in the hundreds. Independently, we have to be.
Yeah. Let me ask you real quick. I know we don't got you on here for much longer. W- what is one of the real life horrors that you have found of being in the industry or doing this? Is and there's probably some that we don't want to talk about. That's fine. But I think that all filmmakers, either you've been through it or you hear the rumors. Would you say that it's just the way that the industry is shaped now compared to what it was in the 90s, the way that it's thriving now? Music, it was destroyed by piracy. Now the physical media is going away. Or is it the work ethic of working? Has it been working with certain people along the way or having people look over your shoulder? I know that's a huge thing that people don't like. You take your baby and then somebody's going to produce it, but then it's kind of like, well, it changes because now their money, you know, their final thoughts.
So there's a few things we're battling. One is what I've been already telling you about with the changing in the market. The other is inflation, right? Like,
Mhm.
so the same catering to feed the crew, which maybe cost me 10,000 for the shoot, is now 30,000.
Wow.
Um, the camera package, everything has exponentially gone up because wages have gone up, costs have gone up, hard goods have gone up. So everything has just gone up. So we're feeling that as regular consumers in everything. But you have to understand it's also greatly affecting the movie business. So revenue for sales is down, costs
Mhm.
are going up, and we're in
Right.
this zone right now, which is how can things cost more? Not to mention we had 3 strikes, and now we're paying more money for our directors, our writers, and our actors. And when things are costing more already, and we get less money.
Mhm.
So it's not making a whole lot of sense. And that's where we have to be super creative, which I've learned how to be on tax credits, rebates, um, co production agreements with other countries, all this stuff that's super complicated, time consuming, and takes away from all the fun stuff is what I've had to focus on because just making a movie doesn't make sense anymore. You have to find all kinds of free money. We also got to grab brand integration money. Like whatever we have to do, because if a movie costs 10, it's only worth 5.
Mhm.
So if it's only worth 5 and it costs 10, how do I make my money? How do I pay everybody? How do I not lose money? And that is where we get into these extremely complex tax saving entities that will work. And again, the biggest one is is co-production agreements with other countries and tax credits and rebates. So that's one area. The other area that's been really annoying is the progressive trying to be politically correct, um, trying not to offend people. Um, That's making it really difficult creatively. And look, there are things that we had to learn as a society. There's behavior that had to be corrected, but we tend to overreact on these things. And it's really dangerous when you
Mhm.
censor the comics of the world. And I don't feel this anywhere worse than in the comedies. And we just made a comedy called Wingman last October with Harlan Williams and Jamie Kennedy and Russell Peters, three brilliant comics. And look, the job of a comedian is push the line. Like,
Mhm.
you want to figure out what that line is. You want to get just cross it a little bit so we know where the line is. Otherwise, we're just constantly below the line. And and comics have been, going back to like the Lenny Bruces and the Carlins, like these are people that also have evoked change and thought provoking and causing us to rethink or relook at things and just laughing. And if you take away that comics ability to do that and just tell them you can't do this because it's offensive, it's dangerous, and we're not growing as a people when you do that. You're just stifling people, you're just censoring people. So we have to find this balance between not offending people and allowing creatives to push the line. And unfortunately, it's not even just in the performances and the writing of the scripts. It's also in like the hiring of people. I had a film where, in Canada, they have something called a BIPOC rule. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, Person of Color, where 35% of the production needs to be BIPOC, right? So on the Canadian content stuff, I'm, loading up on people. I'm not just going, who's my best qualified? Who's the best name actor for the role that gets me the best sales? Who's the most qualified grip or gaffer? Who, like, I actually have to forget about, again, by the way, sometimes the most qualified and best people are people of color, but you're talking about a very small minority in Canada.
Mhm.
Like, there's a lot less black people there than in America, but you have this huge percentage, way bigger than the population percentage, of what you have to put in the film. So it makes it really challenging. And what's happened is the agents know this. So like the black actors, for example, who don't even have necessarily great credits or, certainly no sales help. A lot of them are extremely expensive because you can't get them and you have to hire them. So that's happening, right? So it's just making it even more difficult. Like, let's just make it an even playing ground. Let's just hire the best people, and by natural selection, we should be having a diverse group. Like, it's in our interest to be as diverse as we can by hiring the best people, and we will hire. I've never not hired, I believe, a person of color in any of my movies. Like, it's just, how many am I forced to versus how many can I draw from? Who's not working? And I could not believe how much difficulty I had with this in casting my film A Christmas Letter, which aired last Christmas Eve on FTV. That's a movie I wrote, by the way, and starred
Mhm.
in. And I had to call in a favor. I had to call my buddy Roger Cross, who's a black actor who was in Vancouver, and I had to fly him in from Vancouver to Ontario, which is basically across the country, right? Just think of like going from LA to New York, because I couldn't get one in Toronto because they were all
Wow.
working. Or like, it's like you want them, it's $250,000 for 5 days. You're like, what are you talking
Right.
about? Like, that's what was going on. And it's because you're forced into a box. So again, we have to find the balance between this. But when we're abnormally inflating a section of the business because you're forcing people into a corner like that, it's not helping. And it's hard enough to make a movie. It's hard enough to balance a budget. It's why tie two hands behind our backs, right? So we want to be inclusive, but at the same time, look what's happening. If we're in a situation where I've got to fly a guy in from Vancouver because there's nobody left in Toronto,
Mhm.
that's a problem, and maybe forcing a certain percentage is not the right way to go.
Well, I'm glad that you dived into all that, and I do appreciate that. I thank you so much because that's a few different things I would love to come from the podcast, and it's information to these aspiring filmmakers, but also the people in the industry that maybe haven't got to your caliber or where you've operated at, because everybody is trying to get to where you're at, man. You put in a lot of work to get there, so I want to give you your props, man, for that, and it's
Thank
very
you.
inspirational. um and not just done a lot of work, but you've done a lot of good work. And there's been many times where I've said, there's the Viper. I just remember seeing you on the show whenever I watch that show religiously. But Full House, I was a huge Full House fan. Whenever I wasn't watching horror, I was watching Full House. And but then to see you, put your stamp on as a writer and director, it's like it's crazy to watch somebody just do what you've done, man. And I appreciate you coming on here and giving the information to young filmmakers, but also shedding some light on how things have been affected, economically. We all want movies. We don't want movies to go away, but unfortunately, there's some creativeness that has to be done there to figure out how to keep them thriving. So I think it's
There's no
very
question.
beneficial.
And look, I do want to say, for me, luckily, I got not only a friend of mine in the movie, but a brilliant actor in Roger Cross. So it worked out for me that I got him to fly in from Vancouver to Toronto. I'm just trying to make the point that we have a hard time making budgets work.
Yeah.
Inflation has gone up, costs have gone up. Let's try and make it easier for the filmmakers, because there's only so much you can keep pushing costs going up and sales going down until we're going to have a major correction in the film business. And maybe that's what's going to happen. You're going to see a lot less movies.
I hope that doesn't happen, man. I love it. I am that guy that enjoys the. I think that the horror genre is definitely oversaturated, but I love horror. I'm diehard, so
Me too. Me
I
too.
love watching them. But for somebody themselves like me that has a horror film coming out, it's like, how do I stand out in this pocket? It is very hard, and it's even harder to get a horror film that's very bloody and gory into a movie theater. It's become a little bit easier lately with the limited releases, but
And foreign sales, like you have too much
yeah,
blood, you're just wiping out countries that won't touch it now, right?
how
Because
do you get rated? You can't even get a rating if you're over the top.
now where we look at things like, let's just take the blood out of it. We have I just want to plug
Mm,
this because it's coming out August 23rd. We have a horror tinged Western called Place the Bones, stars Heather Graham, Tom Hopper, Corin Nemec, who I love, is a good friend of mine, and Cowboy Donald Cerrone, who is just, if you don't know him, one of the winningest fighters in MMA history, but a real cowboy, and so he just brought all this validity to the genre for us, because it's one thing for someone to play a cowboy. It's another when you have a guy who rides a horse like a champ, twirls a gun like a champ, because that's cowboy, right? He shoots, he rides,
mhm.
and his ranch in Montana. So this is, or sorry, in New Mexico, but this is who he is, and so I'm really excited about this movie. And we did not, pull up the blood a lot. Like there's a lot of gunfire and there's a lot of action, and there's some blood, but we really downplayed it because it's become a problem. If you're too bloody, the next thing you know is you're like, they're pulling it from this country. They won't buy it
Yeah,
here. They won't buy it. So we got to think about all this stuff. So if you're wondering, hey, why is stuff so much less bloody all of a sudden?
it
That's
has
why.
to. It
But
has
this
to be.
movie's amazing. We won another Hole in the Head, which is really a horror-based film fest in San Francisco. It's been running 25 years. I'm really proud of that. I hope people go out in the theaters and watch this one August 23rd with Heather Graham and Tom Hopper really crushing it in the two leads.
What
And
was the name
Courtney,
of it again?
Place of Bones. And that trailer has dropped. It's been all over. If you Google it, it'll pop up. The trailer's awesome. And you can see how it's a Western with a little horror flavoring, as I love to sprinkle on. Because
That's
I think
awesome.
straight Westerns are tough these days, but this is going to have some crossover, where it should be for everybody, not just Western people, because we really pushed that crossover into the horror world, you
I
know.
love that. I love that,
Yeah.
man. David, thank you so much. Stay on for just a second here. I'd love to have you back in the future, man. Anything you want to promote, maybe more film talk down the line, or if you figure out how these filmmakers can, if there's something new that we can figure out to keep them thriving, because we don't want the movies to go away.
You got it, man, for sure.
So, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you go follow David across the board. I follow him on Instagram. Guys, I'll leave a description, some links in the description below here. Just check him out. Check out all his movies. Go to IMDb. Just look at all the stuff that he's been in, all the stuff he has coming out. Great guy, and obviously very informational for us today, so it's a big benefit. Smash that thumbs up, comment below, share this on social media. We post every week here. Make sure those notifications are on. But until next time, sweet nightmares.